Speaking of Shakespeare, I wanted to ask you, I actually wanted to ask you this a few interviews ago. How did you come to realize that the Shakespearean plays were written to represent the Flavian origin of Christianity? Also, how did you find out about the Bassano family or Emily Bassano as the author or authors of the plays?
Yeah. Um, well, uh, it didn't require any effort to understand the plays because I had what prior Shakespearean critics did not, which is I understood the Flavian typology.
Mm,
And with that understanding, the meaning of the plays is almost self-evident. I didn't have to do any work to understand the plays. I just had to read them and I could understand them.
mm,
The way what happened was someone asked me about Titus Andronicus,
mm,
and they wondered if there was some sort of understanding of Titus's role in Christianity or something that the Middle Ages might have had that was reflected in the play. And since they knew I was interested in Titus, they asked my opinion. I hadn't read any Shakespeare
mhm,
since college, and where I just thought the stuff was ridiculous. But
mhm,
I read Titus Andronicus to try to respond to this person's interest in it.
mhm,
And when I read the play, I could see immediately that it was a comment on the Flavians. Um, and for example, uh, I think the first thing that I noticed was toward the beginning of the play, um, there is a passage where this person comes up to Titus and he said, "What is your brother doing?" And Titus says, "He's alone and he's
mhm,
killing flies."
mm,
And the guy says, "Why is he killing flies? It doesn't become a brother of Titus to kill flies." And he goes, "Well, but my brother loves to kill flies." You have this, I don't
mhm,
remember it verbatim, but you have this long dialogue about it, Titus's
mhm,
brother killing flies. Well, if you're, classically educated, you would know that Suetonius had made a big deal about Domitian's favorite pastime, which was killing flies by
mhm,
himself.
mhm.
So I knew that
Exactly.
the author was commenting about the Flavians. And then when you come to the crucifixion scene, it's obviously written with an awareness of the Flavian typology. And then at the end, this Titus gives food of human flesh. It's a cannibal feast, just like the Last Supper in the New Testament
Mhm,
is. Um, but it's the Gentiles that are being, unwittingly given human flesh to eat.
mhm,
So and then Titus has a bad end, rather than becoming, this kind of glorified God. He has this bad end. So what has happened is the author was aware of the Flavian typology and of the history of the era and simply reverses it.
mhm,
So this is the thing that is the most apparent, is that the Flavian typology is being reversed. The
mhm,
Jews are, um, kind of this sly, making bad things happen to the Gentiles, like the Romans do, and in the Gospels,
mhm,
and then at the end, bad things happen to the Gentiles. So after I read Titus Andronicus, I then, I had the book. I had the folio, had the entire all of the corpus of the Shakespearean literature. So I started reading the preface at the beginning of the folio, and there was just an absolutely transparent um, piece of evidence as to what is going on. They took the panegyric that Pliny the Elder wrote for Titus.
mhm,
He wrote this homage to Titus, and they took it and applied it to Shakespeare, but
mhm,
they reversed the ethnicity so that it wasn't unleavened bread. In other words, they took it and applied it the same language to and except they instead of, whereas Pliny the Elder was talking about Jews, they were talking about Gentiles.
mhm,
And so this was the reversing of the and of course the Pliny the Elder um, comment, the one that the Shakespearean authors or the folio authors were using. It's this cryptic description of Christianity.
mhm,
And this is if you read the passage in Pliny and you're aware of the Flavian origin of Christianity, you can see it's absolutely transparent that Pliny the Elder is talking to Titus or writing an homage to him,
Mhm.
and he's making humor about the war against the Jews and the creation of Christianity and of the crucifixion scene and of Mary. These things are all
Mhm.
elements that he's talking about. So it's just kind of crude Roman humor about the creation of Christianity. Well, the Shakespearean team reverses it.
Mhm.
And then once I sort of knew it was reversal, I could understand all of the plays immediately, like Romeo and Juliet, the scene at the end, where Romeo, representing Rome,
Mhm.
is,
Mhm.
so you have it's a cannibal scene, and he comes back from the dead, but he doesn't come back from the dead. So it's
Yeah,
these
yeah.
are gospel elements, and what was kind of curious, I thought clever on the part of the Shakespearean team or the author, is that where the Flavians kind of used Judaic temporal prophecies like Daniel, where
Mhm.
the week or the 40 years of wandering, is they put these elements into Christianity. Here, what the author does is he uses the Feast of Lamistad, which is the reversal of the Passover,
Mhm.
because the Passover is the unleavened, it's the bread consecration. Well, Lamistad is the Christian version of that,
Mhm.
and so that's the timeline, as opposed to like Daniel, they use Lamistad.
Mhm.
But the point is that the bread is not, whereas in the Gospels the bread is Jewish flesh. Here it's obviously Christian flesh. This is what,
Mhm.
and they have like dozens of puns on the word flower. They're indicating flowers, like you're the
Mhm.
flower of my eye. But
Mhm.
these are all puns on the idea of creating the bread for the feast of Lamistad, which will of course be like Romeo and Juliet. you know.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's a very, they just took the grim Flavian humor, and
Mhm.
they created it as a Jewish comedy, right?
Mhm.
And so this is what was apparent to me. And so, armed with that, I tried to determine the author, and I went through sort of the possible individuals, and I threw out all of the like Bacon, and there are different reasons. Marlowe was possible, I thought,
Mhm.
but his style of writing, really, because it's well known, you can read The Jew of Malta. His style of writing is really not. But I knew the person was a Jew, so there would be a Marrano, right? Because
Yeah.
at this point you couldn't be a Jew legally in England, and so they would be, come from a Marrano background. There's one famous family of Marranos at this point, and it's the Bassanos. They were the court musicians for Henry VIII,
Mhm.
and one of them was well known as an author, Emilia Bassano. She had written the first work of literature ever copyrighted by a woman in English language, Salve
Mhm.
Deus Rex Jordam, term meaning
Mhm.
"Hail God, King of the Jews."
Mhm.
Anyway, so I read that play, and I could instantly. It was just absolutely transparent that this was the author of the Shakespearean material, because first of all, she starts out with a very, very long preface in which she's talking about her cannibal feast of the Passover.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's been, people have asked, they wonder if this woman is mentally ill or something, because she just can't get away from how she's inviting all of these noble women to her Passover feast.
Mhm.
And and this is the same kind of wry humor, that's in the Shakespearean literature. And then so then I went into her background, and this was what I could see immediately she was the author, because she's the only person really who could have written it, because she's the only one who had the attributes um,
Mhm.
that the author needed. She was a language tutor. She spoke the necessary language. She had a Jewish background. Her family comes from Verona, and the actual areas where the Shakespearean Italian plays occurred. She'd been to Denmark, but moreover,
Hmm.
she was the mistress of Henry Hudson, who
Hmm.
was the person who controlled. He was the Queen's kind of literary censor, and he also had a company of men. He put on plays. He put
Hmm.
on plays at the Globe, and so she had a perfect avenue to get her plays produced. Um, and so she had, that was the main thing, is that she had the prerequisite knowledge that the author of the Shakespearean literature had to have. They talk a lot about the Shakespearean imagination, Shakespearean critics, but they don't understand that imagination is not knowledge. You
Hmm.
cannot imagine a concept like the Lombardy Mile,
Yeah.
these Italian slang expressions. I mean, this has to come from somewhere. It's not out of imagination.
Hmm.
So you have to posit an author that would have the knowledge to be able to produce, like plays about Italy. He would know the court intimately. All of these details that the Shakespearean author had. There was really only this one individual who was also an author who wrote in iambic and who
Hmm.
had this light literary touch that was, I mean, she used expressions like all of the world is a stage, for
Hmm.
heaven's sake. So it was clear to me that she was the author. I don't think she wrote all of them. I think she wrote the ones that are famous. I
Hmm.
think that histories probably, she was the mistress of Christopher Marlowe
Hmm.
and has a long passage inside the Merry Maids of Winders, where she talks about Marlowe's death and about her love for him. It's all symbolically represented, and it's very beautiful. And so that's nice
Hmm.
literature on her part. Um, so I think Marlowe trained her. She wanted to make a response against Christianity, obviously, um, and this probably, comes about from personal experiences with Christians. I think she had, she was given to the Queen's sort of this Henry Hudson. I think she's either 13 or 14. I don't think this is a pleasant experience for her. He gets her pregnant 4 or 5 years later, and he dumps her. So this is sort of the background. She doesn't like the Gentile nobility at all and
Hmm.
wants to mock them. And she was aware of the Flavian typology. And I think that's, if you look at the Jacopo Bassano painting, which was written like 50 years before she was born, you can see that that painter knew about the cannibal symbolism, in the New Testament. So her family had this understanding, and that's how I was able to piece her together. She had the right knowledge, she had the right literary skills, and of course her career is perfectly situated. Many of the candidates they give don't really link up to the dates that the literature was produced. They either
Hmm.
died too early or too late, or whether she was ideal. And you can, once it's sort of like once you have the right framework, Billy, you're on to the self-identifying comments in the sonnets, for example, where suddenly the dark lady has a voice and she's speaking about the color of her breasts. My
Hmm.
breasts are done. I mean, would a male write this stuff?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so what's in back of all this?
Hmm.
Well, when you see it's autobiographical and that she's had to keep her real identity hidden, I mean, the sonnets just are absolutely transparent at that point. So this was the process. It sounds kind of complicated, but actually, I'm embarrassed to say my whole career as a Shakespearean like researcher was probably no more than 4 or 5 days. I mean, I
Hmm.
I got the question about Titus. I had the folio sitting here. I hadn't read it, but I had it, and I started reading it. And then I read it over the weekend, and all of the plays could make sense. And then
Hmm.
I went to UCSB, the library. We have a very good library there,
Hmm.
and I was able to pretty quickly narrow down Emilia Bassano, and then all of her works were available there, and I could read through them. And so, a couple days in, I was done. Um, as far as that part of it, you can spend a lifetime trying to study the plays. I mean, the
Hmm.
plays are so complicated, and but in general, the gist of them and kind of the level of understanding. I mean, people have like often get these people that are kind of curious about either my methodology or sort of my lifestyle, and
Hmm.
like actually, I'm not someone who spends a lot of time in this kind of research. I researched the Gospels as a puzzle. I couldn't make any sense out of them, and once I solved the puzzle to my satisfaction, I just my interest in them almost became zero.
Hmm.
Same thing with Shakespeare. I was curious about them, and then once I kind of had it, and to my satisfaction, resolved, I didn't really want to do any more research into it. For one thing, it's very hideous. I mean, the
Hmm.
Shakespearean literature is very violent and hate-filled and genocidal toward Gentiles. I mean,
Hmm.
once to me, it is the most important thing about the Shakespearean material is not the author. Everyone thinks this is some big discovery. It's what the plays mean.
Hmm.
That's the important discovery. They are a depiction of a Jewish secret project um, to genocide Gentiles. I mean,
Hmm.
read the analysis in the Tempest, and you'll see my take on this. So how can Western civilization sort of absorb that information, given that Shakespeare's role in our culture? It's the same thing with the Gospels. I mean, um, it isn't so much that I discovered that the Flavians wrote them. It's just that they are a comic mockery of the stupidity of the people who are becoming Christians, and
Hmm.
so it's the nature of the authors and of the cryptic and vile meaning that these kind of foundation pillars of our culture have that I think is most important. And I would only hope, Billy, that people take the right approach to this understanding and not become cynical, but rather energized to basically have a world where there is disclosure about the motivations of the oligarchs, that they don't
Hmm.
get to hide like within the feudal systems behind these mind control techniques, so that the population ends up subservient.
Hmm.